Welcome back. Thanks for being with us here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. I'm Stacey Delicat. It is Friday, March 2nd. We've got a lot to cover for you today. We are going to be recapping the case of George Birch, who was found guilty yesterday of murdering Nicole Vanderhayden by a Green Bay, Wisconsin jury. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be looking ahead to some big trials happening next week, including the murder trial of Tex McIver, a prominent Atlanta attorney charged with murdering his wife. I'm also going to have a special guest to talk about that case, and we'll talk about some other high-profile stories in the news, including the upcoming trial against the wife of the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting suspect. But first, we want to talk about a big story that's been in the news for weeks now, and that is gun control. That is calls for more gun control. I'm joined on set now by Colin Kalmbacher. He's a law and crime writer. And
Nice,
Colin, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This week, some big happenings, right? Because Walmart and Dick's both came out and said they would make changes in terms of how they sell guns. We know Dick's came out and said they would stop selling AR-15 type rifles altogether, and they also said they'll stop selling those weapons to adults under 21. Walmart saying they'd stop selling some sorts of ammunition, and that they would also stop selling high-powered rifles to adults under 21, right?
Correct, yeah.
First of all, let me ask you, was this a surprise to you?
Was it a surprise? Not particularly. Every time there is America's latest, newest in fashion mass shooting, a lot of private companies come together to try to, I suppose, assuage the fears, particularly of people who have constantly been gun control advocates, and they throw them olive branches. They come out with these big proclamations, press releases, they go on cable TV, and they talk about what they're going to do differently. Dick's, we know in particular, has done this in the past, and they stopped selling AR-15s, and then they restarted selling AR-15s, but now they promise this time, pinky swear, I guess, that they're going to stop selling AR-15s altogether. So not really particularly surprising, no.
Right, and of course, these decisions were hailed by gun control advocates. Lots of people on social media thanking Dick's, thanking Walmart, but condemned heavily by Second Amendment rights advocates.
Sure.
And, you know, especially a company like Walmart, the biggest retailer in America, that's all over America, not just the coastal states. I would think that there is a lot of blowback there. But you say this move could actually be illegal in some states. Explain that, because a lot of people say, well, is it a Second Amendment violation? But you say, no, that's not it.
Right. So let's go ahead and first of all dispense with this idea that the Second Amendment has much of anything to do with it. That is the, I guess, the emotional pull for conservatives who are getting easily triggered by this, these announcements. But these are private companies. They are making choices based probably on what their shareholders and their CEOs, the people that are concerned with the money making, want. These are not decisions that are being necessarily made because these companies have huge hearts or anything. It's probably a good business decision for them, but they're private decisions by private companies. This is not government action, so that's not what the Second Amendment has anything to do with. It's just not even breached here.
So the violation, the possible illegality has to do with state laws.
Right, right. In about 18 or 19 states plus D.C., there are age discrimination features written into public accommodations laws, statutes. Whether or not you find it funny, ironic, or whatever, most of the time these laws are contained in the state's human rights statutes. The broader collection of laws are human rights statutes. So basically what these 18 or 19 states plus DC say is that if you are a retail establishment and you are open to the public and you are offering your services or your products to the public, you cannot discriminate against people on the basis of sex, of color, of creed, religion, or in some states, age. And so in these 18 or 19 states, the decision to ban adults, legal adults, from buying a weapon, whether these adults are, you know, aged 18, 19, or 20, could run afoul of those laws.
You know, the argument we hear so often from gun control advocates is you shouldn't be allowed to buy a rifle if you can't buy a beer. So some people might say, well, don't alcohol restrictions apply to that law as well, to the age discrimination law?
Sure. Well, they do and they don't. Here's how the states get around these kind of things, or why these don't really have much to do with one another. Those laws are actually written into the state's constitutions or into their state's full statutory collection of laws. So there are specific laws dealing with drugs and alcohol, tobacco and alcohol, I should say, probably marijuana in more and more states as that gains steam. But the public accommodation laws don't have any carve-out exceptions. As far as I'm aware, I didn't go through all 18 or 19 states, but I did do about half of them extensively, and I was not able to find any sort of carve-out that says, yeah, you can not discriminate unless it has to do with guns. It's just simply not there.
Interesting. 19 states, give us a sense of some of them. You don't have
Sure.
to list all 19,
Yeah,
so people have a sense of whether their state is one of these that has the law.
Right, so let's do like a little bit of like a geographic grab bag. I started in the article I wrote with New Hampshire, which is the live free or die state. Once again, this is the State Human Rights Commission. They basically, if someone is making a complaint or is being affected by this law negatively, then what they do is they write, they phone, they fax, they email the State's Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission investigates, and then they have the authority to hold hearings, basically talk to the Attorney General, try to get a judge to weigh in on this, and then they can issue injunctive support, or relief, I should say. So in New Hampshire, you go through a bureaucratic body, and hopefully you'll eventually get some type of advisory opinion or a judicial decision saying, no, actually, Dick's, actually, Walmart, you have to sell guns to 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and 20-year-olds if you're going to sell them to adults at all. Of course, all of these, any of these retailers could go ahead and say, well, we're just not going to sell guns to adults. That would be fine.
Right.
Because they're not picking and choosing who they're going to sell to.
It's just that under 21. Now, you say you expect there will be lawsuits filed in many states. Have any been filed yet? Not
that I'm aware of. These decisions just came in the past couple of days. I would imagine that, and you know, it's probably going to be Second Amendment rights organizations that are pushing for these types of lawsuits, or some really wealthy Second Amendment activists, particularly in states that have conservative attorneys general. Or in a state like Tennessee, though, you do have the opportunity for just a regular, normal person. They have civil actions or civil relief written into that law. So in New Hampshire, as far as I'm aware, a private person isn't going to be able to sue Dick's, at least not in a very expeditious fashion. But in Tennessee, for example, you do have a private right of action, so you could kind of bypass all that state circuitry and just go ahead and go straight for them and say, this is my actual human right to buy a gun as an 18-year-old.
So what are the real-world implications of this for people, you know, who shop at these stores and may be upset by these new rules that they've implemented?
If you are trying to buy a gun and you are of age in these states and you get turned down, then make a note of it, document it, take copious notes is what they used to tell us in law school, and then talk to somebody in the state or talk to an attorney if you're in one of the states that allows a private right of action, and sue them. That's all you can do. It's not like the cops are going to come and tell Dick's and Walmart that they have to start selling guns again to this age group.
Or just go somewhere else to buy the gun, because I'm sure there are plenty of other places to get it.
There's always that.
Just one last question for you. You mentioned Dick's had done this in the past in response to a high-profile shooting. Were there any lawsuits at that time?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not aware of anything along those lines. But once again, I think Dick's prior decision was to just stop selling AR-15s across the board. And if Dick's and Walmart wanted to do that in these 18, 19 states, they could certainly do that. The bottom line here is you can't discriminate against people's age, even if it's, you know, going from the top down towards the younger people. Most of the time we talk about age discrimination or ageism in regards to elder law. But here, this is one of the, I guess, few instances where they're trying to discriminate against, you know, younger folks, and that's not allowed.
Well, Colin, very interesting reporting you did, so thanks so much for being with us here to answer some questions. I think a lot of people had no idea or don't have any idea that this may be illegal in some states, so it'll be interesting to see whether any lawsuits are in fact brought. As you predict, they will be. So
yeah, we'll be looking out for them, and if they are, then
you'll be covering it on Law&Crime.com. Well, thanks again, Colin. We're going to be right back with more from yesterday's guilty verdict in the George Birch trial. Stay with us.